March 9th, 1944. 0347 hours. Central Atlantic, 800 miles west of the Azores. The sonar contact appeared on my scope like a ghost materializing from the darkness, a faint return barely distinguishable from the ambient noise of the Atlantic, but unmistakably metallic, unmistakably submarine. I pressed the headphones tighter against my ears, filtering out the hum of our ship's engines, the creak of steel under strain, the whisper of water flowing past our hull. There, a subtle change in the acoustic pattern, a signature that meant only one thing: U-boat, submerged, trying to stay silent while we passed overhead. My name is Lieutenant Commander Daniel Dan McKenna, United States Navy, and I was the anti-submarine warfare coordinator aboard USS Guadalcanal, a ship that German naval intelligence had dismissed as more liability than asset. A small, slow aircraft carrier converted from a merchant hull carrying obsolete aircraft, crewed by reservists with minimal training. Admiral Karl Dönitz himself had reviewed intelligence reports about these baby flat tops and concluded they represented American desperation rather than tactical innovation. He was about to learn that the most dangerous hunter isn't always the fastest or strongest. Sometimes it's the one you never hear coming, the one that appears where you don't expect it, the one that hunts with patience and precision rather than speed and firepower, the one that turns your own stealth against you, that makes the ocean itself your enemy, that destroys you so completely that your comrades never learn what killed you. Sonar contact confirmed, I reported quietly into the intercom, keeping my voice level despite the adrenaline surge. Bearing 270, range 1,800 yards, depth approximately 200 feet. Designate as probable submarine contact. Classification, U-boat. Captain Daniel Gallery's response came immediately. All hands to battle stations, ASW. Air Group, prepare aircraft for immediate launch. This is not a drill. We've got ourselves a U-boat. Around me, USS Guadalcanal transformed from a ship at routine patrol into a precisely coordinated hunting machine. On the flight deck above, aircraft handlers were already positioning TBM Avengers equipped with depth charges and acoustic homing torpedoes. In the operations center, plotting officers were calculating intercept courses. Throughout the ship, 860 men who'd trained for exactly this moment were moving to their stations with practiced efficiency. The German U-boat commander below us, whoever he was, whatever his experience level, had no idea he'd been detected. He was running silent, maintaining depth, probably congratulating himself on avoiding the destroyer escorts that usually screened convoys. He'd learned from years of Atlantic combat that American escorts were predictable, that their sonar had limited range, that submarines could evade detection through careful depth control and silent running. But what he didn't know was that the rules had changed, that American escort carriers had revolutionized anti-submarine warfare by bringing aircraft to the middle of the Atlantic where land-based planes couldn't reach, that those aircraft carried new detection equipment and weapons that made traditional U-boat evasion tactics obsolete, that he was being hunted by a coordinated air-sea team specifically trained to find submarines that thought they were invisible. He didn't know any of this because the 52 U-boats that had encountered hunter-killer groups before him were all at the bottom of the Atlantic, their crews dead, their final moments never reported to U-boat headquarters. He didn't know because we were killing submarines faster than German naval intelligence could identify the cause. He didn't know because the weapon system hunting him was so new, so unexpected, so completely outside traditional naval warfare doctrine that the Germans literally couldn't imagine it existed. But in approximately 18 minutes, he would understand everything. Just before 2,000 pounds of high explosives crushed his submarine's hull and sent him to join those 52 previous victims. The hunt had begun, and this U-boat was already dead. It just didn't know it yet. The concept of escort carriers, small, slow aircraft carriers converted from merchant hulls, emerged from desperate necessity. By 1942, German U-boats were winning the Battle of the Atlantic through a simple tactical advantage. They operated in a mid-Atlantic air gap, where land-based aircraft from Britain or America couldn't reach. In this 1,000-mile-wide zone, submarines could surface safely to recharge batteries, travel at higher speeds, coordinate wolf-pack attacks, all without fear of air attack. The solution seemed obvious: bring aircraft to the mid-Atlantic by putting them on ships. But fleet carriers were too valuable, too few in number, and too needed in the Pacific to dedicate to escort. What the Navy needed was something smaller, cheaper, built in large numbers, a ship that could carry just enough aircraft to cover a convoy's immediate area, force submarines to stay submerged, and coordinate with surface escorts to hunt down contacts. The Kaiser shipyards in Vancouver, Washington, provided the answer. Mass-produce small carriers using merchant ship hulls and standardized components. The EVC program would eventually build 50 escort carriers using techniques that paralleled Willow Run's bomber production. Systematic construction, standardized designs, workers with minimal shipbuilding experience building sophisticated warships. German naval intelligence tracked this construction program and dismissed it as further evidence of American industrial waste. A Kriegsmarine assessment from July 1942 stated, "The Americans are building small, slow aircraft carriers with minimal defensive armament and limited aircraft capacity. These vessels are too slow to operate with fleet units, too weakly defended to survive surface combat, and carry too few aircraft to be effective. They represent misapplication of industrial resources that would be better spent on fleet carriers or escorts." Admiral Karl Dönitz himself was more direct in his assessment. These jeep carriers are targets, not threats. A surfaced U-boat can outgun them. A submerged U-boat can evade their primitive aircraft. They will accomplish nothing except providing more ships for us to sink. By March 1944, escort carriers operating in hunter-killer groups had sunk 31 U-boats. Dönitz still didn't understand what was killing his U-boats. He attributed the losses to improved destroyer tactics, better sonar, perhaps enhanced air coverage from Greenland and Iceland bases. The possibility that small, slow carriers were systematically hunting down and destroying his U-boats never occurred to him because it violated every principle of naval warfare he understood. Aircraft carriers were fleet units that projected power through massed airstrikes. They operated with battle groups, protected by cruisers and destroyers, far from enemy submarines. The idea of using a carrier, even a small one, as a submarine hunter was as nonsensical as using a battleship to sweep for mines. It simply wasn't how naval doctrine worked. But American naval doctrine had evolved beyond traditional thinking. We'd recognized that in anti-submarine warfare, persistence mattered more than speed, coordination more than firepower, and presence in the right place at the right time more than massive striking power. A small carrier that could maintain aircraft over a suspected submarine contact for hours, that could coordinate with surface escorts in real time, that could appear anywhere in the Atlantic without warning, that was more valuable than a fleet carrier with 100 aircraft somewhere else. The Germans never understood this until it was too late. And by the time they figured out what was killing them, we'd perfected the tactics to the point where encountering a hunter-killer group meant near certain death. USS Guadalcanal wasn't supposed to be a warship at all. Her keel had been laid as SS McMail, a C-3 cargo ship designed to carry freight along American coastlines. Then the Navy acquired her hull, added a flight deck, installed hangar facilities and aircraft elevators, fitted her with minimal defensive armament, and commissioned her as an escort carrier in September 1943. She was 512 feet long, about half the length of a fleet carrier. She displaced 10,400 tons, less than a quarter the weight of USS Enterprise. Her flight deck was so short that landing aboard her was considered the most challenging evolution in naval aviation. Her top speed was 17 knots, slower than most destroyers, and barely faster than a surfaced U-boat. But she could carry 28 aircraft. She could operate continuously for weeks without resupply. And most importantly, she could coordinate air and surface assets in a way that turned traditional naval combat into systematic extermination. Captain Daniel Gallery, commanding officer, understood what Guadalcanal represented. "We're not a fleet carrier," he told his officers during our first mission briefing. "We're not going to launch massive airstrikes or engage enemy fleets. We're submarine killers, plain and simple. Our job is to make the Atlantic Ocean a death trap for every U-boat that operates in it. We're going to hunt them down methodically, coordinate with our escorts, and sink every submarine we find. This is industrial warfare applied to submarine hunting." Our task group consisted of Guadalcanal and 5 destroyer escorts: USS Pillsbury, USS Pope, USS Flaherty, USS Chatelaine, and USS Jinx. These were small, cheap escorts built specifically for anti-submarine warfare, not fast enough to screen fleet carriers, not powerful enough for surface combat, but perfect for persistent submarine hunting with excellent sonar and depth charge capacity.
The tactics we'd developed were revolutionary. Traditional anti-submarine warfare was reactive. Convoys were attacked. Escorts would counterattack. Submarines would escape. We were proactive. We'd actively search for submarines, coordinate air and surface searches, track contacts for hours or days, attacked persistently until the submarine was destroyed. The key was coordination. Aircraft from Guadalcanal would search wide areas using radar and visual scouting. When they detected a surfaced U-boat, they'd attack immediately and call in surface escorts. If the submarine submerged, aircraft would maintain contact using sonobuoys, floating acoustic sensors that transmitted submarine locations by radio. Surface escorts would converge on the contact, establish sonar tracking, coordinate depth charge attacks. Most importantly, we'd never give up. Traditional escort groups had to maintain station with their convoys, had to break off searches to resume protective screening. Hunter-killer groups had no convoys to protect. We could and would pursue a contact for days if necessary, maintaining continuous pressure, forcing the submarine to stay submerged until its batteries died, then killing it when it had to surface. The Germans had never faced this kind of systematic, persistent hunting. Their tactical doctrine assumed that escorts would eventually give up, that submarines could evade and escape, that the ocean was vast enough to hide in. Against hunter-killer groups, all those assumptions proved fatal. The hunt for contact, designated U-boat probable bearing 270, demonstrated our tactics in action. At 0352 hours, 4 minutes after initial detection, 4 TBM Avenger aircraft launched from Guadalcanal's flight deck, each carrying 4 depth charges and 1 Mark 24 mine, the code name for an acoustic homing torpedo that the Germans didn't know we possessed. Lieutenant Tom Smith, leading the air section, had the contact coordinates and sonar characteristics. His TBM was equipped with AN/APS-3 radar that could detect surfaced submarines at 15 miles, and he carried 6 sonobuoys that could be dropped to create an acoustic net around the suspected submarine position. At 0358 hours, Smith dropped his first sonobuoy at the last known contact position. The device, a floating microphone with a radio transmitter, began broadcasting acoustic data back to both the aircraft and Guadalcanal. Smith dropped 5 more sonobuoys in a hexagonal pattern, creating overlapping acoustic coverage across a 1-mile diameter area. Contact confirmed, Smith radioed at 0404 hours. Sonobuoy 4 has strong submarine signature, bearing 265 from drop position, moving slowly east. Target is definitely submerged U-boat, depth estimated 180 feet. On Guadalcanal's bridge, Captain Gallery studied the tactical plot. Surface group, intercept course 265, all ahead flank. Maintain sonar search. Air group, maintain contact with sonobuoys, be prepared to attack if target surfaces. The three closest destroyer escorts, Pillsbury, Pope, and Flaherty, turned toward the contact at their maximum speed of 23 knots. They'd reach the position in approximately 12 minutes, establish their own sonar contact, coordinate attack patterns. Below us, the U-boat commander was facing his first hint that something was wrong. He'd heard aircraft engines overhead, always concerning but not immediately dangerous if you stayed deep and quiet. But now he was hearing propeller sounds from multiple surface contacts converging on his position with uncanny accuracy. How were they finding him? His submarine was silent, running on electric motors, maintaining strict depth control. By all traditional submarine warfare doctrine, he should be invisible. What he didn't know was that sonobuoys had eliminated the primary limitation of shipborne sonar. Ships couldn't hear submarines that were far away or at different depths. Sonobuoys could be positioned anywhere, creating acoustic barriers that submarines couldn't cross silently. They'd transform the ocean from a vast hiding place into a grid of detection zones where silent running meant nothing if you were in the wrong grid square. At 0416 hours, USS Pillsbury acquired sonar contact at 1,200 yards. Solid contact, designate submarine, bearing 268, range 1200 yards, depth 190 feet. Target is maneuvering, attempting evasion. The U-boat was trying traditional escape tactics, changing course erratically, adjusting depth, hoping to break sonar contact. Against traditional escorts with limited sonar capability and short contact time, these tactics often worked. Against three escorts with excellent sonar, unlimited pursuit time, and continuous aerial monitoring, they were useless. Commence coordinated attack, Gallery ordered. Pattern Baker 3, depth charge settings 150 and 200 feet. Air group, stand by to attack if target surfaces. The three destroyer escorts moved into formation for a coordinated depth charge attack. Instead of single ships dropping charges sequentially, all three would attack simultaneously from different angles, creating overlapping explosion patterns that gave the submarine nowhere to maneuver. At 0422 hours, USS Pillsbury acquired sonar contact at 1,200 yards. Solid contact, designate submarine, bearing 268, range 1200 yards, depth 190 feet. Target is maneuvering, attempting evasion. The U-boat was trying traditional escape tactics, changing course erratically, adjusting depth, hoping to break sonar contact. Against traditional escorts with limited sonar capability and short contact time, these tactics often worked. Against three escorts with excellent sonar, unlimited pursuit time, and continuous aerial monitoring, they were useless. Commence coordinated attack, Gallery ordered. Pattern Baker 3, depth charge settings 150 and 200 feet. Air group, stand by to attack if target surfaces. The three destroyer escorts moved into formation for a coordinated depth charge attack. Instead of single ships dropping charges sequentially, all three would attack simultaneously from different angles, creating overlapping explosion patterns that gave the submarine nowhere to maneuver. At 0422 hours, USS Pillsbury reported heavy underwater explosion, assess as submarine internal detonation, debris and oil surfacing at attack coordinates. Through the clear Atlantic water, we could see the evidence. Oil spreading in a massive slick, air bubbles rising continuously from depth, pieces of submarine debris, including wood fragments, personal items, and sections of hull plating. The U-boat had died so quickly that its crew probably never knew what killed them. The coordinated depth charge attack had crushed the hull instantaneously, killing everyone on board before they could even process what was happening. Contact destroyed, Gallery announced quietly. Log it as one U-boat sunk, all hands lost. Resume patrol pattern. We've got 3,000 miles of ocean to cover, and there are more submarines out here waiting for us to find them. That was it. 23 minutes from initial detection to confirmed kill. The German U-boat had entered our search area, been detected immediately, tracked precisely, attacked overwhelmingly, and destroyed completely. Its captain had maybe 2 minutes of warning between detecting our escorts and dying in the crushing pressure of collapsing hull plating. The submarine would be logged at U-boat headquarters as missing, gone on patrol, never heard from again, disappeared into the Atlantic without explanation. Donuts would never know how it died, would never learn about sonobuoys or coordinated depth charge attacks or hunter-killer groups. The intelligence that might have saved future submarines died with every crew we sent to the bottom. That was the hunter-killer group's secret weapon. We were killing submarines so completely, so suddenly, that no information about our tactics ever reached the enemy. Every U-boat we destroyed took its lessons to the grave.
The effectiveness of escort carrier hunter-killer groups emerged from technological advantages the Germans couldn't match. Our TBM Avenger aircraft carried an AN/APS-3 radar that could detect surface submarines at 15 miles in darkness or poor visibility. German U-boats had no equivalent detection capability. They relied on lookouts who could see maybe 5 miles in good conditions. Our sonobuoys created acoustic nets that submarines couldn't cross silently. German submarines had no countermeasure. They couldn't detect the sonobuoys, couldn't jam their transmissions, couldn't tell when they'd entered a monitored area. Our Mark 24 acoustic homing torpedoes, disguised as mines for security purposes, could be dropped from aircraft when submarines were detected at periscope depth. These weapons would actively hunt for submarine propeller noise, making evasion nearly impossible. German submarines didn't know these weapons existed until they were hit by them. Most importantly, our coordination between air and surface units was instantaneous through VHF radio communications. When an aircraft detected a submarine, surface escorts knew within seconds. When escorts established sonar contact, aircraft knew immediately. This coordination created a hunting system where submarines were tracked continuously from first detection until destruction. The Germans had none of this. Their U-boats operated independently, with minimal communication. Their aircraft couldn't coordinate with submarines even when both were present, and their detection technology lagged years behind American developments. They were fighting 1940s warfare with 1940 technology against an enemy using 1944 systems and tactics. The result was systematic slaughter. Between March and June 1944, escort carrier hunter-killer groups would sink 28 U-boats while losing only 4 aircraft to all causes. Kill ratios of 7-to-1 were normal. Many submarines were sunk without ever seeing the aircraft or ships that destroyed them, dying in confusion without understanding what had killed them. April 4th, 1944, 06:15 hours, mid-Atlantic, 900 miles west of Ireland. Our second U-boat encounter of the patrol demonstrated how persistent hunting destroyed submarines that traditional tactics couldn't catch. Aircraft from Guadalcanal had detected a surfaced U-boat at 0547 hours through radar contact at maximum detection range, 18 miles in the pre-dawn darkness. The submarine crash-dived before our aircraft could attack, disappearing into the Atlantic depths. Traditional doctrine said we'd lost the contact. The submarine had submerged in time, would run silent, would escape under the ocean's vast expanse. Captain Gallery had different ideas. Air Group established sonobuoy at the dive position, pattern Sierra 5, 8 buoys in 2-mile spacing. Surface Group, converge on last known position, establish sonar search pattern. We're going to find this boat and kill it, even if it takes all day. The TBM Avengers dropped their sonobuoys in a carefully calculated pattern that created overlapping acoustic coverage. If the submarine moved at all, and it would have to move eventually because battery power didn't last forever, it would enter a monitored zone. If it stayed stationary, it would eventually have to surface to recharge batteries. Either way, we'd find it. For 6 hours, we maintained contact through intermittent sonobuoy detections as the submarine tried to evade. It would move slowly at depth. We'd detect it on buoys. It would stop and go silent. We'd wait. It was underwater chess, the submarine trying to slip through our net, us tightening the net with each detection, gradually narrowing its options. At 12:47 hours, the submarine made its fatal mistake. Running critically low on battery power, it tried to sprint through what its captain hoped was an unmonitored area at higher speed. A sonobuoy picked up the increased propeller noise immediately, giving us precise position and course. All escorts, converge, maximum speed. Air Group, prepare for immediate attack. Target is making a run, moving fast. This is our chance. 3 destroyer escorts converged on the contact at flank speed. The submarine, detecting the approaching propellers, tried to go deep and silent again, but it was too late. Our escorts had solid sonar contact from multiple angles. The coordinated depth charge attack began at 13:04 hours. This time, knowing the submarine was deep and had experienced crew, we used a deeper pattern. Depth charges set for 300, 350, and 400 feet, creating a 3-layer kill zone that covered every depth the submarine might reach. The submarine tried to evade downward, diving past its rated crush depth in desperation. At 13:09 hours, sonar operators reported hearing implosion sounds, the submarine's hull collapsing under pressure that exceeded its structural limits. The crew's final seconds were spent in a steel tube being crushed like an aluminum can, water pressure forcing the hull inward until it failed catastrophically. Debris surfaced: oil, wood fragments, a Kapok life jacket, personal items. The U-boat had been destroyed not by direct hit from depth charges, but by being forced so deep that ocean pressure finished what our attack began. It was a new kind of kill, death through relentless pursuit that gave the submarine no choice except fatal extremes. 6 hours from initial contact to confirmed kill, Gallery noted in his patrol report. The submarine captain was skilled and tried every evasion tactic in the book. None of them worked because we never gave up, never lost contact for more than minutes, never let him surface to recharge batteries. This demonstrates the fundamental advantage of hunter-killer tactics. Persistence defeats skill when you have unlimited time to hunt. The psychological impact on German U-boat crews was severe and mounting. Submarines that returned from Atlantic patrols reported encounters with aircraft that appeared from nowhere in mid-ocean, areas where submarines couldn't surface without immediate attack, persistent hunting that lasted days. But submarines that didn't return, an increasing percentage with each month, couldn't report anything.
U-boat headquarters recognized that losses were increasing, but couldn't identify the cause. Admiral Dernitz's war diary from April 1944 noted, "Atlantic losses have reached unsustainable levels. Submarines are disappearing without trace, without engagement reports, without any indication of how they're being found and destroyed. American anti-submarine capabilities have improved dramatically, but the specific cause remains unidentified." German naval intelligence knew about American escort carriers, but classified them as convoy defense units, not offensive submarine hunters. The concept of carriers actively searching for submarines, maintaining persistent contact over hours or days, coordinating with surface escorts in real time, it simply wasn't in their tactical framework. Carriers launched strikes against enemy fleets or supported amphibious operations. They didn't hunt submarines in mid-Atlantic. The doctrinal blindness meant German U-boat crews kept operating using tactics that had worked in 1942, but were suicidal in 1944. May 15, 1944, 14:20 hours. Central Atlantic, 700 miles northeast of the Azores. Our patrol's third major engagement demonstrated the ultimate evolution of hunter-killer tactics, capturing a submarine intact. Intelligence officers had been pressing for live captures, boarding enemy submarines, recovering codebooks, capturing Enigma machines, taking prisoners who could be interrogated about the latest U-boat tactics and technology. Captain Gallery thought it was possible. If we damage a submarine enough that it can't dive, but not so much that it sinks, if we surround it with overwhelming force before the crew can scuttle, if we board fast enough, we might capture one intact. The opportunity came when our aircraft detected U-505 surfaced and recharging batteries. The submarine crash-dived as our TBMs attacked, but one depth charge exploded close enough to damage the hull and knock out electrical systems. The U-boat surfaced involuntarily, unable to dive, dead in the water. Surface group converge immediately. Air group strafe the submarine's deck. Keep the crew from manning deck guns, but don't sink her. We're going to take this boat. What followed was the most dramatic boarding action in U.S. Navy history. USS Pillsbury came alongside the wallowing submarine, while her boarding party, led by Lieutenant Albert David, jumped aboard with weapons ready. German crew were abandoning ship, having set scuttling charges, believing capture was inevitable. The American boarding party found the submarine filling with water from damaged hull plates and scuttling valves the crew had opened. David and 8 sailors went below into a flooding submarine, found the scuttling valves, closed them, stopped the flooding, secured the Enigma machine and codebooks, and prevented the submarine from sinking. U-505 was towed to Bermuda in absolute secrecy. The German crew was segregated from other prisoners and told nothing about their submarine's fate. As far as U-boat headquarters knew, U-505 had been sunk with all hands. They never learned we'd captured it intact, recovered its codes and equipment, gained intelligence that would help us hunt other submarines more effectively. The Enigma materials helped Allied codebreakers maintain access to German naval communications. The captured submarine provided technical intelligence about the latest U-boat equipment and capabilities. Most importantly, it proved that hunter-killer groups could not only sink submarines, but capture them, the ultimate demonstration of tactical superiority. Gallery's patrol report was triumphant. Captured 1 U-boat intact with crew of 58. Submarine is being towed to secure facility for technical exploitation. Crew is in custody and segregated from other prisoners. This operation demonstrates that with proper tactics and aggressive execution, American forces can achieve objectives that enemy considers impossible. The strategic impact of escort carrier hunter-killer groups extended far beyond the submarines they sank. By mid-1944, German U-boats were effectively driven from the Atlantic convoy routes. Dönitz recognized that losses exceeded replacement capacity, that experienced crews were being killed faster than new crews could be trained, that the technological and tactical balance had shifted irrevocably against submarines. On May 24, 1944, Dönitz withdrew U-boats from North Atlantic convoy routes, acknowledging that submarine warfare in this vital area had become unsustainable. The decision represented Germany's admission of defeat in the Battle of the Atlantic, the longest and most critical campaign of the European War. Escort carriers had been decisive. Of the 72 U-boats sunk between March and August 1944, hunter-killer groups accounted for 31, 43% of total kills, despite representing less than 20% of Allied anti-submarine assets. Their effectiveness per unit deployed exceeded traditional escorts by factor of 4. The psychological impact was equally important. U-boat crews knew they were being hunted by something new and deadly, but they didn't know what. The uncertainty, submarines disappearing without explanation, patrols returning with stories of persistent aircraft and coordinated attacks, areas of ocean that seemed impossible to operate in safely, undermined morale and effectiveness. By August 1944, German U-boat crews had developed escort carrier psychosis, anxiety symptoms appearing when operating in areas where hunter-killer groups had been reported. Experienced submarine commanders were refusing to surface even when technically safe, were aborting patrols early, were avoiding entire areas of ocean based on rumor and fear. The weapon the Germans had mocked as targets, not threats, had destroyed their submarine warfare capability through systematic, persistent, technically superior hunting that rendered traditional submarine tactics obsolete. Our patrol ended June 12, 1944, exactly 6 days after D-Day. We'd been at sea for 47 days, covered 12,000 miles of ocean, sank 3 U-boats confirmed with 1 probable, captured U-505 intact, and fundamentally changed the tactical balance of the Atlantic War. As Guadalcanal entered port at Norfolk, Virginia, I stood on the flight deck, watching the Virginia coastline appear on the horizon. We'd done what German naval doctrine said was impossible. Operated a small, slow carrier as an offensive submarine hunter, achieved kill ratios that exceeded fleet carrier aircraft in combat effectiveness, captured an enemy submarine intact through a boarding action. Gallery gathered the crew for his end-of-patrol address. Gentlemen, we've just completed the most successful anti-submarine patrol in U.S. Navy history. We've proven that escort carriers aren't just convoy defense. They're offensive weapons that can hunt down and destroy submarines anywhere in the Atlantic. The Germans thought we were targets. We've proven we're the most dangerous submarine killers in the war.
He was right, but he was also understating what we'd accomplished. We hadn't just developed new tactics. We'd created a new kind of warfare where persistence and coordination mattered more than speed and firepower, where systematic hunting defeated evasion, where technological advantage rendered enemy doctrine obsolete. The 50 escort carriers that would eventually serve in the U.S. Navy would sink 53 German U-boats and 15 Japanese submarines, over 15% of all submarine kills during the war, achieved by ships that represented less than 5% of Allied anti-submarine assets. Their effectiveness per unit exceeded every other category of anti-submarine platform. But the real impact was strategic. By making the Atlantic untenable for U-boats, escort carriers guaranteed that American industrial production could reach Britain and the Soviet Union, that invasion forces could cross to Normandy unopposed by submarines, that the material superiority of the Allies could be brought to bear against Germany. The German admirals who'd laughed at these slow, small carriers learned through systematic defeat that naval warfare had evolved beyond their understanding. The Kriegsmarine had designed doctrine based on 1939 technology and 1939 tactics. American forces were fighting with 1944 technology and tactics developed specifically to exploit enemy weaknesses. Post-war interrogation of German naval personnel revealed complete misunderstanding of escort carrier capabilities and employment. Admiral Donitz, questioned about hunter-killer groups, stated, "We knew Americans had small carriers for convoy defense. We didn't know they were using them offensively as submarine hunters. This tactic was outside our doctrinal framework. Carriers were fleet units, not escorts. By the time we understood what we were facing, our submarine force had been decimated." German submarine commanders who survived the war and were interviewed expressed uniform shock at American coordination and persistence. One U-boat captain stated, "We prepared for convoy escorts, destroyers with limited sonar and short pursuit time. Instead, we faced carriers with aircraft that found us anywhere, sonobuoys that made silence useless, and escorts that pursued for days without giving up. We had no tactical response because we couldn't understand how the system worked." Most tellingly, German naval engineers examining captured American equipment after the war noted, "The Americans integrated air and surface anti-submarine capabilities in ways we never conceived. Their sonobuoys, acoustic torpedoes, and coordinated air-surface tactics created hunting systems against which our submarines had no effective defense. They won through systematic technological superiority, not individual ship or crew quality." The final statistics of escort carrier anti-submarine operations tell the story of revolutionary capability deployed with devastating effectiveness. Escort carrier production. Total CVEs built, 122, 50 for U.S. Navy, 72 transferred to Britain. Average construction time, 6 months from keel-laying to commissioning. Cost per ship, $5 to $8 million, compared to $68 million for fleet carriers. Accurate capacity, 24 to 28 aircraft typical. Top speed, 17 to 19 knots. Crew, 860 officers and men. Hunter-killer group composition. 1 escort carrier, 3 to 6 destroyer escorts. Dedicated to submarine hunting, not convoy escort. Operated independently across assigned patrol areas. Could pursue contacts for unlimited time. Combat effectiveness. U-boats sunk by CVE hunter-killer groups, 53. U-boats probably sunk, 15 additional. Japanese submarines sunk, 15. Aircraft lost to all causes, 47. CVEs lost to submarine attack, 1. USS Block Island, torpedoed May 29, 1944. Kill ratio, U-boats destroyed versus CVEs lost, 53-1. Tactical innovation. Sonobuoy technology. Transformed acoustic detection from shipborne limitation to aerial capability. Mark 24 acoustic torpedo. First practical air-launched homing weapon. Coordinated air-surface search. Aircraft detected submarines, vectored surface ships to contacts. Persistent hunting. Unlike convoy escorts, hunter-killer groups could pursue contacts indefinitely. Night operations. CVE aircraft could hunt submarines 24 hours using radar. Strategic impact. Atlantic U-boat operations rendered unsustainable by May 1944. Convoy losses declined from 96 ships, 476,000 tons in March 1933 to effectively zero by mid-1944. U-boat crew morale collapsed under persistent hunting by unidentified forces. German naval doctrine proven obsolete by tactics that violated all traditional assumptions. I served on board Guadalcanal for 3 more patrols, each one adding to our kill count, each one refining our tactics, each one proving that escort carriers had revolutionized anti-submarine warfare. We sank 7 U-boats total, captured 1 intact, and spent 196 days at sea hunting submarines that had no idea they were being systematically exterminated by a weapon system their intelligence had dismissed as worthless.
The final patrol ended October 17, 1944. By then, U-boats had been driven from the Atlantic convoy routes, were operating primarily in coastal waters where they could hide in shallow depth, were being used increasingly for weather reporting rather than commerce raiding. The Battle of the Atlantic was over, won decisively by Allied forces that had outbuilt, out-innovated, and outfought the German submarine force. After the war, I attended a reunion of escort carrier veterans in San Diego. Over 1,500 men who'd served aboard the baby flat tops gathered to share stories, remember shipmates, celebrate survival. Admiral Gallery gave the keynote address, and his words captured what we'd accomplished. The Germans laughed at our escort carriers, called them slow, weak, pointless, said they were targets, not threats. They were wrong about everything. We took small, cheap ships that shouldn't have been able to do anything significant, and we created the most effective submarine hunting system in naval history. We proved that innovation and proper tactics mattered more than size and speed. We demonstrated that American naval ingenuity could defeat German submarine excellence through systematic, persistent, technically superior hunting. The room erupted in applause that lasted 5 minutes. These were men who understood what they'd done, turned the weapon everyone dismissed into the decisive factor in the Atlantic War, proven that persistence and coordination defeated evasion and stealth, validated the American approach of systematic warfare over individual excellence. The legacy of escort carrier anti-submarine operations extends directly to modern naval aviation. Every anti-submarine aircraft, every coordinated air-sea operation, every hunter-killer group deployed by every modern navy traces its tactical lineage to the CVE groups of 1944. The U.S. Navy learned that projection of limited air power to critical locations mattered more than concentration of massive air power at fleet anchorages. This lesson influenced Cold War carrier deployment, where presence mattered more than striking power for many missions. The coordination techniques developed for hunter-killer groups, real-time communication between air and surface units, shared tactical picture, integrated command and control, became foundational for modern naval warfare. Every Aegis cruiser, Every modern destroyer, every maritime patrol aircraft uses coordination methods pioneered aboard escort carriers hunting U-boats. Most importantly, the CVE program proved that innovative employment of modest assets could achieve strategic effects that concentrated traditional forces couldn't match. 50 small carriers achieved more in anti-submarine warfare than the entire Atlantic Fleet's destroyer force, not through superior individual capability, but through systematic coordination and persistent presence. Modern anti-submarine warfare, P-8 Poseidon aircraft coordinating with destroyers and submarines, sonobuoy fields creating acoustic barriers, helicopters extending surface ship sensor range, is the direct descendant of tactics we developed aboard Guadalcanal in 1944. The technology has advanced immeasurably, but the operational concept remains identical. Use aircraft to extend sensor range, coordinate with surface units for attack, maintain persistent pressure until target is destroyed. The Germans who laughed at escort carriers as more liability than asset learned through systematic defeat that they'd fundamentally misunderstood naval warfare's evolution. Carriers weren't just fleet strike platforms, they were sensor platforms that could project detection capability hundreds of miles, coordinate distributed forces in real time, and enable tactics impossible without aviation. That lesson, learned at terrible cost by German submarine crews, shaped all subsequent naval development. The age of pure surface warfare ended when aircraft could detect, track, and coordinate attacks on submarines from hundreds of miles away. The Battle of the Atlantic was the last major naval campaign where surface forces could expect to operate without air coordination. 75 years later, I'm 94 years old, the last surviving officer from Guadalcanal's original crew. The ship itself was scrapped in 1958, her steel recycled, her history preserved only in photographs and official reports. But what we accomplished aboard her changed naval warfare forever. Sometimes I visit the Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, where they preserved a TBM Avenger painted in Guadalcanal's markings. Young naval officers ask me what it was like, how we did it, whether we knew we were making history. The truth is simpler than they expect. We were solving problems, hunting submarines, developing tactics through trial and error because the war demanded results. We didn't think about revolutionary tactics or strategic innovation. We thought about finding the next U-boat, coordinating the next attack, bringing our aircraft home safely. The revolution happened because we refused to accept that small, slow carriers couldn't hunt submarines effectively. We developed techniques that worked, refined them through experience, proved them through results. The German admirals who dismissed escort carriers as targets learned through systematic destruction of their submarine force that their assessment was catastrophically wrong. Every U-boat we sank was proof that coordination mattered more than firepower, that persistence defeated evasion, that systematic American methods worked better than German tactical excellence. By war's end, German U-boat operations had collapsed not because they lacked brave crews or capable submarines, but because they were being hunted by a weapon system they'd never anticipated and couldn't counter. Escort carriers projecting air power to mid-Atlantic, coordinating with surface escorts, and maintaining persistent contact through sonobuoys and radar. It was warfare that German doctrine hadn't prepared for and German technology couldn't match. The final German naval assessment, written by Admiral Dönitz after surrender, acknowledged complete defeat. American anti-submarine warfare achieved technical and tactical superiority we couldn't overcome. Their escort carriers projected capabilities to areas we thought safe. Their coordination between air and surface forces gave them persistent tracking we couldn't evade. Their systematic hunting destroyed our submarine force more thoroughly than direct combat could have. We lost the Atlantic not through lack of courage, but through facing an enemy whose methods we never understood until it was too late. That captured the essential truth. World War II at sea was won through American innovation applied systematically. Escort carriers that shouldn't have been effective, tactics that violated traditional doctrine, weapons the enemy didn't know existed, coordination that exceeded anything previously achieved. We didn't win through individual ship superiority or crew excellence. We won through creating a hunting system that made traditional submarine warfare impossible. The lessons of escort carrier anti-submarine operations remain profoundly relevant to modern warfare. When analysts say distributed operations can't work, remember that 50 small carriers achieved more than concentrated fleet operations. When someone claims traditional platforms are sufficient, remember that innovation and proper employment mattered more than capability specifications. When experts declare new tactics won't work because they violate doctrine, remember that the most effective tactics often emerge from rejecting traditional limitations. The German naval leadership that laughed at escort carriers learned their mistake through losing 53 U-boats to ships they dismissed as worthless. They learned that size and speed mattered less than presence and coordination. They learned that systematic American methods defeated tactical German excellence when applied with proper innovation. Most importantly, they learned that underestimating American ingenuity and industrial capacity was fatal. The nation that could build 50 carriers from merchant hulls in 2 years, that could train crews for a new type of warfare in months, that could develop revolutionary tactics through systematic experimentation, that nation would always defeat opponents who relied on traditional methods and dismissed innovation. The escort carriers were never supposed to be war winners. They were supposed to be cheap convoy escorts, stopgap measures until fleet carriers could be built, temporary solutions to immediate problems. Instead, they became the decisive weapon in the Atlantic War, the platform that made submarine warfare untenable, the innovation that proved American industrial democracy could outthink and outfight any opponent. 75 years later, that lesson endures. The most effective weapon isn't always the most powerful or expensive. Sometimes it's the one nobody expected, employed in ways doctrine never anticipated, achieving results that experts declared impossible. The escort carrier proved that in 1944. The lesson remains valid today. I think about the U-boat crews we killed, young German sailors who died in crushed steel tubes at the bottom of the Atlantic, who never understood what hunted them, who perished confused and terrified as their submarines imploded around them. They were brave men serving their nation, doing their duty as they understood it. They weren't evil. They were warriors in a war not of their choosing. But they were on the wrong side of history and the wrong side of innovation. They fought using tactics that had worked in 1942 against enemies who'd moved beyond those tactics by 1944. They trusted in stealth and skill against opponents who'd developed systematic methods that rendered stealth irrelevant and defeated skill through persistence. The mathematics of that mismatch were inexorable. Superior detection versus inferior evasion, coordinated hunting versus individual maneuvering, persistent pressure versus limited endurance, systematic American methods versus tactical German excellence. The outcome was predetermined once we'd developed hunter-killer tactics and deployed them systematically. Every U-boat crew we encountered died learning lessons their comrades would never benefit from. Every submarine we sank took its tactical intelligence to the bottom. Every engagement refined our methods while teaching the enemy nothing. By the time German Naval Command understood what was killing their submarines, the war was effectively over. That's what revolutionary warfare looks like. One side fighting tomorrow's war, while the other fights yesterday's war. The Germans perfected submarine warfare as it existed in 1940. We invented submarine warfare as it would exist in 1944. They never caught up because we never gave them time to learn. The last reunion of Guadalcanal veterans took place in 2019. Only 12 of us remained from the original crew of 860. 12 old men in our 90s, gathering one final time to remember the ship and shipmates long gone. We stood together and recited the names of the 7 U-boats we'd sunk, honoring both our victory and acknowledging the enemy sailors who died at our hands. Someone asked me if I felt guilt about the Germans we'd killed. The answer is complex. We were at war. They were trying to sink our merchant ships, starve Britain, prevent American supplies from reaching allies. We stopped them using every means available. I don't feel guilt about that. It was necessary warfare against an enemy that had to be defeated. But I do feel sorrow for the waste. Young men dying in terrible ways, families destroyed, futures erased. War is always tragedy, even when necessary. The Germans we killed were somebody's sons, somebody's brothers, somebody's husbands. They died afraid and in pain, trapped in flooding steel tubes, crushed by pressure, or drowned in darkness. I hope they died quickly. I hope they didn't suffer long. I hope their families found peace despite never knowing how they died or where they were buried. And I hope the world remembers both sides fought bravely, even though only one side was right.
The escort carrier crews weren't heroes seeking glory. We were sailors doing our duty, hunting submarines because that was our mission, killing enemy crews because that was warfare's grim mathematics. We didn't celebrate kills or glory in destruction. We felt professional satisfaction in tactical success, relief when our own men came home safely, determination to keep fighting until the war ended. The Germans laughed at our ships and dismissed our capabilities. We proved them wrong through systematic excellence, technical superiority, and relentless persistence. That's the story I want remembered. Not individual heroism, but collective achievement through proper organization, innovative tactics, and systematic application of American industrial and technical superiority. We built ships the enemy mocked, developed tactics the enemy didn't anticipate, achieved results the enemy thought impossible. That was the American way of war in 1944, and it remains relevant today. Innovation defeats tradition. Coordination defeats individual excellence. Persistence defeats evasion. Systematic methods defeat tactical brilliance. The escort carriers proved all of this while sinking 53 U-boats and changing naval warfare forever. That's the legacy I'm proud to have contributed to, and the lesson I hope future generations will learn from our experience.